A deadly blizzard rages, swallowing trapped pioneers. "I promised I'd be your wife," she screams into the storm. 20 years later, she faces death, clinging to that childhood vow. As the mountain man emerges from the whiteout, a singular detail in her gaze ignites a forgotten destiny. The youth whose name was whispered among the few trappers and prospectors as a formidable mountain man, moved with the quiet grace of a forest creature. His days were a symphony of survival, the bite of an axe splitting seasoned wood, the careful placement of a snare, the patient vigil by a rushing stream for trout. His world was the ancient rhythm of the seasons, the unforgiving beauty of granite peaks and the solace of solitude. He carried the burdens of his own fractured past, a quiet sorrow that had driven him deep into the wilderness, where the raw honesty of nature offered a brutal, yet pure, form of healing. He found comfort in the predictable cycles of life and death in the wild, a stark contrast to the fickle allegiances and betrayals of mankind. The promise of the little girl was merely a fleeting memory, a whimsical image that occasionally surfaced like a spring thaw, before retreating under the weight of his chosen isolation. Yet, something within that laugh, that seemingly innocent dismissal, had planted a seed in his soul, a faint but persistent hum of a destiny unwritten, subtly shaping his solitary existence without his conscious awareness. For the little girl, the mountain man was a titan, a hero cloaked in animal skins and exuding the scent of pine and wood smoke. To her, he embodied the wild freedom she craved, a stark contrast to the stifling confines of her own transient existence on the fringes of civilization. Her family, perpetually on the move, chasing whispers of prosperity that always seemed to dissipate like morning mist, had briefly anchored near his solitary cabin. In those fleeting days, amidst the vastness of the mountains, his presence was a beacon of strength and unwavering calm. She adored him with the fierce, uncomplicated devotion only a child can muster, seeing beyond his rough exterior to the quiet strength that resided within. Her declaration had been a genuine offering, a simple truth spoken from a heart unburdened by doubt, a heartfelt wish for a future she believed was as certain as the rising sun. Her small, hopeful spirit clung to the image of him, even as her family's wagons creaked away, pulling her further and further from the towering peaks and the man who had laughed. The mountain man, watching her small figure disappear into the winding trail, had felt a peculiar pang. Not of loss, but of a quiet certainty that their paths, though now diverging, held a deeper, unwritten connection. He had returned to his cabin, the familiar scent of cured hides and simmering stew offering a different kind of comfort. He cleaned his rifle, sharpened his axe, and tended his traps, each movement a practiced ritual. He was a creature of habit, a master of his domain, but as the sun dipped below the jagged horizon, painting the sky in fiery hues, he found himself recalling the girl's earnest face, the unwavering belief in her eyes. The echo of his own laughter, meant to be light-hearted, now felt strangely hollow. A tremor of unease, a premonition perhaps, stirred within him, a sense that the world, with its relentless turning, was about to claim them both, separating them not just by distance, but by the relentless hammer of experience, forging them anew before an inevitable and profoundly altered reunion. The path ahead for both would be fraught with the sharp edges of loss and the silent burden of perseverance, leading them inexorably towards a future neither could yet comprehend. The world, once a tapestry of familiar hues, had been swallowed by an insatiable white. 20 years had worn away the child's laughter, carving lines of resilience and sorrow onto the face of the woman she had become. Life on the frontier was a relentless tutor, teaching lessons of loss and endurance with brutal efficiency. She had seen hopes wither like frost-bitten crops, and dreams shattered like ice on stone. Yet deep within, a faint ember glowed, fueled by the memory of a giant who had laughed, and a promise spoken with a child's unwavering conviction. Then came the blizzard, a tempest of unimaginable fury that descended without warning, a swirling vortex of white death. It began with an ominous whisper, a chill that seeped into the bones, then escalated into a roaring maelstrom. The air grew thick with flying snow, blinding all sight, deafening all sound save for the shriek of the wind. A caravan of settlers, their faces etched with the weariness of endless travel, found themselves ensnared in a valley that quickly transformed into a frozen tomb. Wagons, once symbols of progress and hope, became fragile cocoons against the encroaching cold. Horses whinnied in terror, their breath pluming white and freezing instantly on their muzzles. Men hardened by years of taming wild lands stood bewildered, their axes useless against the onslaught, their eyes reflecting the stark terror of utter helplessness. She moved among them, a silent sentinel, her gaze sweeping over the scene of unfolding despair. The harsh years had stripped away her youthful buoyancy, replacing it with a quiet strength that emanated from her core. She had nursed the sick, buried the dead, and learned the bitter taste of betrayal, but she had never broken. Now, as the last vestiges of daylight surrendered to the blizzard's suffocating embrace, she knew in her heart that conventional hope was a fragile thing, easily extinguished. The cold was a living entity, its icy fingers probing for weakness, stealing warmth, breath, and finally life itself. Supplies dwindled, fires struggled against the relentless wind, and the faces of the children, once bright with frontier adventure, turned pale with fear and hunger. Despair, a silent and insidious companion, settled over the camp, colder than the deepest snow. Her own breath hitched in her chest, not from the cold, but from the weight of the realization pressing down upon her. These were good people, brave in their own ways, but they were utterly unprepared for the raw, untamed power of these mountains. Their survival skills were for plowing fields and building cabins, not for battling the very breath of a winter god. As she watched a young mother clutch her shivering child, a fierce, primal instinct ignited within her. They could not die here, not like this. An image flashed through her mind, vivid and sharp. A young man, tall and broad, his eyes sparkling with mirth, his laugh echoing across sunlit peaks. A phantom scent of pine and wood smoke filled her senses, cutting through the biting cold. Only a force of nature, she understood with startling clarity, could fight another force of nature. Only a man forged by these peaks could guide them out of this white hell. The memory of him, a figure from a forgotten dream, now coalesced into a desperate, singular truth. There was something unnerving about the blizzard's ferocity, a suddenness that defied the predictable patterns of the mountains. Some whispered of a curse, of ancient spirits angered by their intrusion. A trapper, his face gaunt with fear, spoke of a peculiar symbol carved into a fallen tree trunk near where the first wagons had become hopelessly mired, a mark he had never seen before in all his years roaming these trails. It was a spiral within a triangle, an archaic emblem of warning, almost as if the very path they had chosen, desperate for a shortcut, had been a deliberate snare. This wasn't merely a storm, it felt like a judgment, a test orchestrated by forces beyond human comprehension. The woman dismissed the superstitions, but the unease lingered, a chilling thought that their path to destruction felt almost too precise, too inescapable, hinting at a design far more sinister than mere meteorological chance. As the last embers of their largest fire struggled against a fresh gust of wind, casting fleeting, dancing shadows on the snow-laden pines, she made her decision. It was a silent, solemn vow. Her small family, those few survivors still clinging to a thread of hope, would not perish here. She would find him. The mountain man, the boy who had laughed at her childhood promise, was now their only hope. Clenching her fists, she pulled her threadbare cloak tighter, the raw wind tearing at her resolve. She looked up at the impenetrable wall of white, then down at the fragile faces huddled against the cold. With a strength born of desperation and a burgeoning belief in a fate she had long dismissed, she took a single, deliberate step away from the dying fire, towards the roaring, unforgiving heart of the blizzard, her eyes fixed on an unseen horizon, on a figure only she truly remembered. She walked for what felt like an eternity, a ghost in the swirling snow, guided only by an instinct born of desperation and the faint, persistent echo of a childhood memory. The blizzard raged, a monstrous white hand pushing her back, blinding her, threatening to swallow her whole. Her feet ached, her lungs burned with the icy air, and fatigue gnawed at her resolve. But the faces of the freezing settlers, especially the children, burned brighter than any fire in her mind, driving her forward. Each step was a battle, each breath a prayer. Just as her strength threatened to fail, a subtle shift in the wind, a faint whisper against the storm's roar, brought the scent of wood smoke. Faint, almost imperceptible, yet it was a beacon in the oppressive whiteout, a promise of warmth and perhaps salvation. She stumbled upon it rather than saw it, a rough-hewn structure, half buried in snow, nestled deep within a thicket of ancient pines. It was a fortress against the wild, built of sturdy logs and chinked with mud, its single window a dim, amber eye against the encroaching darkness. Smoke curled lazily from its stone chimney, a thread of life in a world of death. This was the sanctuary, the mythical dwelling of the man forged by these mountains. Her heart pounded, a frantic drum against her ribs. She raised a trembling hand and knocked, a weak, almost unheard sound against the howling wind. The silence that followed was immense, heavy with the weight of expectation. Then, the creak of wood, the scrape of a bolt, and the massive door swung inward just enough to reveal a figure cloaked in furs, silhouetted against the warm glow of a hearth fire. He was a giant, even larger than her childhood memories had painted him. His face, framed by a thick beard and weathered by sun and wind, was a landscape of stoic endurance. His eyes, the color of a winter sky, were piercing, wary, assessing. He held a rifle loosely in one hand, a silent testament to his self-reliance and his profound distrust of intruders. The years had hardened him into the solitary sentinel of the peaks, a man who had chosen isolation as his shield against the world's complexities. His gaze swept over her, taking in her snow-crusted clothes, her gaunt face, the desperation in her eyes, yet not a flicker of recognition crossed his features. To him she was merely another lost soul, a fragile creature on the brink of succumbing to the mountain's cruel embrace. "I need your help," she rasped, her voice raw with cold and exhaustion, a mere whisper against the wind's shriek. "A caravan trapped in the valley, dying." He merely stared, his expression unreadable, a silent question in his piercing gaze. He was a man of the wild, a survivor, but his world was one of self-sufficiency, not of rescuing lost souls. The delicate balance of his solitary existence, meticulously maintained for 2 decades, was suddenly threatened by this unexpected intrusion. He saw the flicker of life, the stubborn defiance in her eyes, even as her body trembled from cold and hunger. A part of him, buried deep beneath layers of hardened resolve, recognized a kindred spirit, a survivor, albeit a softer one. A glint of metal caught her eye, a small, silver locket resting on a rough-hewn table inside the cabin. It was open, and within a faded daguerreotype of a young woman with a gentle smile, her eyes remarkably similar to the man standing before her. A sister, perhaps, lost to the same world that had driven him to these peaks. The locket was old, well-worn, and held a story of its own, a silent testament to the grief that had carved his solitary path. He hadn't just fled civilization, he had been broken by it, much like herself, though his wounds were deeper, more self-imposed. This was not just a hermit. This was a man who had built a fortress around a wounded heart, guarding it against further pain. The knowledge settled in her, cold and certain, that his isolation was not born of malice but of a profound and enduring sorrow. He moved then, slowly, deliberately, a powerful presence filling the doorway. His voice, when it came, was a low rumble, weathered by silence and the wind. "The mountain takes what it wants." He paused, his eyes searching hers, piercing through the layers of her disguise, recognizing not the child, but the spirit of the woman. "I will help those who help themselves. You can stay if you can pull your weight. But my cabin is no refuge for idleness. The mountain demands a price, and so do I. Are you willing to pay it?" His words were not a question of payment in coin, but in effort, in loyalty. in an understanding of the brutal, honest rules of his world. He offered not comfort, but a harsh sanctuary, a temporary reprieve from the White Death, in exchange for a willingness to bend to the raw, unyielding will of the wild. The mountain man's cabin was a world unto itself, a microcosm of survival where every object had a purpose, and every task was essential. For the woman newly admitted to this austere sanctuary, the transition from refugee to an active participant was swift and demanding. He set her to work immediately, testing her mettle without a word, observing her every move with the keen, discerning eye of a predator. He watched as she learned to mend torn furs with sturdy stitches, a skill honed by years of making do. She chopped kindling with surprising precision, her small hands growing calloused but never faltering. Her movements, initially hesitant, became more confident, more purposeful, as she embraced the brutal rhythm of mountain life. She learned to identify the edible roots and berries, a knowledge passed down from her own grandmother, a skill that surprised him with its unexpected utility. He watched her tend to the small wounds of the freezing settlers she had brought back, her touch gentle, her knowledge of herbal remedies surprisingly vast. He saw the flicker of curiosity in his own gaze, a tiny crack in the stoic facade he had cultivated for decades. Her presence, initially a jarring disruption, began to weave itself into the fabric of his solitary existence. The cabin, once a mere shelter, began to soften, imperceptibly at first. The scent of pine and wood smoke was now subtly mingled with the faint aroma of freshly baked bread and simmering herbal teas. Her quiet competence, her unwavering resilience, slowly chipped away at his ingrained skepticism. She did not complain. She did not demand. She simply did, transforming the harsh reality of their situation with small, practical acts of care. It was her knowledge of healing, surprisingly extensive and intuitive, that truly began to bridge the chasm between them. One evening, a young boy from the rescued caravan, shivering despite the fire, began to cough violently, his breath shallow and ragged. Fear spread through the small huddled group. The mountain man, accustomed to dealing with broken bones and animal bites, watched, helpless as the child's fever spiked. It was then that the woman knelt beside the boy, her touch cool and steady. She brewed a concoction of mountain herbs, carefully gathered and dried, a remedy taught to her by a traveling medicine woman years ago. She coaxed the bitter brew down the boy's throat, her voice a soft murmur of reassurance. Slowly, miraculously, the child's breathing eased, the fever began to recede. The mountain man, watching from the shadows, felt a profound shift within him. It was not his strength, his knowledge of the trails, or his formidable hunting skills that had saved this child. It was her quiet wisdom, her gentle touch, her ability to nurture life where he merely preserved it. She brought warmth not just to the cabin, but to the very spirit of its inhabitants. She was not just mending furs, she was mending souls. Her presence, once a burden, was becoming an undeniable blessing. The cabin, which had always been a bastion of survival, was slowly, subtly, beginning to transform into a home, a place where not just bodies but spirits found solace and care. But the mountain was a fickle mistress, and peace was a fleeting illusion. Just as a fragile sense of normalcy began to settle, a new challenge arose, one that threatened to shatter the burgeoning trust and drive a wedge between the woman and her stoic protector. A trapper, a grizzled old man named Silas who sometimes traded furs with the mountain man, arrived unexpectedly, his face grim. He had braved the lingering cold to deliver a warning, his eyes dark with suspicion as they fell upon the woman. Whispers had begun to circulate in the distant trading posts, carried by travelers finally making their way through the receding snow. The woman, it seemed, carried a past more complicated and dangerous than anyone knew, a shadow that threatened to extend its icy tendrils even into the isolated sanctuary of the mountain man's cabin. Her very presence, Silas declared with a dismissive wave of his hand, would only bring trouble. The mountain man, for the first time since her arrival, felt a cold knot of dread tighten in his gut, a chilling premonition that the quiet solace they had found was about to be violently torn apart. The fragile peace of the cabin, still thawing from the blizzard's fury, was shattered by Silas's ominous words. The mountain man, usually impervious to gossip, felt an unfamiliar disquiet. His gaze, accustomed to dissecting the wilderness for danger, now searched the woman's face, seeking confirmation or denial of the trapper's veiled accusations. But before any questions could be asked, a guttural cry pierced the night. One of the rescued settlers, a young man named Caleb, had fallen ill again, far worse than before. His breath came in tortured gasps, his skin flushed and clammy, his eyes unfocused. He thrashed in a feverish delirium, his body racked by an unknown ailment that defied the woman's usual remedies. The mountain man, seeing the terror in the eyes of the remaining settlers, knew this was no ordinary sickness. It was a plague, a shadow that stalked the isolated valleys, claiming the weak and the unprepared. He had seen its ravages before, entire camps wiped out, leaving only silence and despair. His powerful hands, accustomed to felling trees and wrestling with bears, felt useless against this invisible enemy. He barked orders, demanding fresh water and hotter fires, but his commands lacked the usual authority, tinged with a helplessness he rarely displayed. The woman, however, moved with an urgent, purposeful calm. She recognized the symptoms, a virulent form of mountain fever that had claimed many lives in the remote settlements where she had spent her troubled youth. It required not just herbs, but a desperate, dangerous journey. "We need a specific route," she declared, her voice steady amidst the rising panic. "Only found on the northern slopes near the Widow's Peak. It thrives in the deepest snow, protected by ancient pines. It must be dug up before the full moon tomorrow night, or its potency will be lost." Her words hung heavy in the air. Widow's Peak was notorious, a treacherous climb even in fair weather, a place of legends and avalanches. No one dared venture there in winter. Yet the choice was clear: risk the mountain's wrath or watch Caleb and perhaps others succumb. The mountain man hesitated for only a moment, his eyes scanning the faces of the terrified settlers, then resting on the pale, struggling boy. He had made a promise to protect them, a silent pact forged in the blizzard's heart. He grabbed his axe, preparing for the perilous ascent. But the woman stepped forward, intercepting his gaze. "No," she said, her voice firm. "I know its exact location. The signs to look for. You are needed here, to guard against other dangers, to keep these fires burning." Her eyes, usually so guarded, held a fierce, unyielding resolve. She was not asking for permission. She was stating a fact, a responsibility she willingly embraced. He saw in her not weakness but an extraordinary quiet courage, a strength that was both practical and deeply spiritual. It was a strength born not of muscle, but of a boundless, empathic heart. Hours later, as the wind howled its mournful dirge, the woman returned, a small pouch clutched in her frozen hand, her face etched with exhaustion but her eyes blazing with triumph. She had faced the mountain and wrestled its secret from its icy grip. With steady hands, she prepared the root, brewing a potent elixir. She administered it to Caleb, and through the long, anxious night she sat by his side, whispering words of encouragement, willing him back from the precipice. As dawn painted the eastern sky in muted hues of pink and gray, Caleb's fever broke. His breathing became regular, his eyes fluttered open, clear and calm. A wave of profound relief washed over the small group. The tension, held captive for days, finally broke. The mountain man knelt beside her, his large hand gently covering hers. He looked at her, not with admiration for a task well done, but with a raw, almost painful reverence. In that moment, the carefully constructed walls around his heart crumbled. He spoke, his voice hoarse with emotion, revealing the profound grief he had carried for 2 decades. The loss of his younger sister to a similar fever, a tragedy that had driven him into self-imposed exile, convinced he could not protect those he loved. His solitude had been a penance, a futile attempt to outrun sorrow. She, in turn, confessed her own wounds, the betrayals and abandonment she had faced, the cruel twist of fate that had left her an outcast, forever yearning for a place to belong. Two pariahs, each scarred by life, had found in the other a mirror, a kindred spirit. Their hands, calloused by different struggles, intertwined, sealing a pact of mutual understanding and burgeoning affection. It was a moment of profound communion, a silent promise to bear each other's burdens. Silas, the old trapper, watched from the doorway, his cynical face softened by the scene. He shook his head, a faint, almost imperceptible smile playing on his lips. He had arrived to plant seeds of doubt, but instead he had witnessed the miraculous blossoming of a deeper, more enduring truth. The mountain man, once alone, was alone no more, and the woman long adrift had finally found an anchor. With Caleb's recovery, a fragile yet profound sense of equilibrium settled over the mountain man's cabin. The frantic energy of survival gave way to a quiet rhythm of daily life, underscored by a burgeoning connection between the mountain man and the woman. The unspoken traumas, revealed under the harsh light of crisis, had forged a bond deeper than words. Now, in the stillness of the mountain, they began to nurture it. They worked together, side by side, gathering firewood, mending the cabin, sharing the silent camaraderie of two souls finding solace in shared purpose. In the long evenings, as the fire crackled and cast dancing shadows on the log walls, they would sit, often in silence, sometimes sharing fragments of their lives. He spoke of the mountain's ancient wisdom, of tracking game, of reading the sky. She, in turn, spoke of the lost art of spinning wool, of the comforting rhythm of needle and thread, and of the forgotten melodies her grandmother once sang. Their stories, like two separate streams, flowed together, merging into a wider river of shared understanding. The rough edges of his solitude began to soften, yielding to the gentle warmth of companionship. Her weary spirit, long accustomed to fleeing, found an unprecedented sense of belonging. The cabin, once a stark bastion, now radiated a quiet, hearth-centered warmth, a true home built on mutual respect and a profound, silent affection. One blustery afternoon, while clearing snow from a hidden spring, the woman stumbled upon an old, intricately carved wooden bird. It was nestled in the roots of an ancient spruce, half buried in the snow, its delicate wings weathered by time. She picked it up, brushing away the icy dust, a strange feeling of déjà vu washing over her. She remembered a similar bird, almost identical, carved by her own grandfather, a wanderer who had eventually settled near a remote trading post not far from these very mountains. She showed it to the mountain man. He took it, his rugged fingers tracing the familiar lines, his eyes widening in a rare moment of surprise. "My sister," he murmured, his voice thick with emotion. "She had one just like it. Our father carved them for us twins when we were children, before everything changed." A shiver, not of cold, ran through the woman. It was too much of a coincidence. Her grandfather, a quiet man with nimble hands, had indeed traded occasionally with a reclusive family living high in the mountains. He had spoken of a young boy, skilled and solitary, and a bright-eyed girl who had loved his carvings. The realization settled between them, heavy and undeniable. Their paths had been destined to intertwine not just by chance, but by a delicate thread woven through their families' pasts, a thread that stretched back further than their own memories. Their connection was not merely born of shared hardship, but of a forgotten past, a predestined reunion that felt both miraculous and entirely inevitable. The wooden bird, a silent witness, now became a symbol of their enduring, ancestral bond, a link between lost souls finally reconnected. Just as the last vestiges of winter began to recede, promising the fragile hope of spring, a shadow fell upon their newfound peace. The mountain man, returning from a trapping run deep in the lower valleys, carried a grim expression, his usual stoicism replaced by a deep-seated concern. He had found fresh tracks, too many, too precise, not of game, but of men, and worse among them, a distinct bootprint he recognized from his days on the fringes of civilization, a symbol of a ruthless bounty hunter known for his relentless pursuit of targets. Whispers from the distant settlements spoke of a reward, placed by a powerful family, for a young woman who had disappeared years ago, a woman now believed to be living in the wild. Her presence tied to a hidden family fortune. Their sanctuary, once impenetrable, was no longer safe. The outside world, with its avarice and cruelties, was closing in, its icy breath already chilling the air around their newfound home. The faint tracks, half erased by recent snowfall, told a chilling story. The mountain man's stoic calm fractured, replaced by a fierce primal protectiveness. His solitary existence had taught him the harsh realities of danger, but never before had he felt the burden of another's safety so acutely. The bounty hunter, a specter from the world he had abandoned, was a man of cold efficiency, driven by greed and a reputation for always getting his prey. He knew the hunter would not simply demand the woman. He would take her, seeing her as mere property, a prize to be collected. The mountain man's sanctuary, once a haven from the world, now became the battleground for its intrusion. For the woman, the news brought a cold wave of dread. The past she had fled, the bitter betrayals and the oppressive shadow of a tyrannical father, had finally caught up to her. He was a man of immense wealth and influence, and to him, she was merely a runaway daughter, a pawn in his schemes for a greater inheritance. The bounty was not just for her return, but for her forced marriage to a man of his choosing, a final act of control designed to secure his fading legacy. The thought of returning to that gilded cage to a life without agency, without the raw honesty of the mountains and the profound connection she had found, was a fate worse than death. She was no longer a victim. She was a defender, fiercely protective of the home they had built, the family they had found in each other. The mountain man set about fortifying their small cabin, his movements deliberate, methodical. He sharpened his axe, loaded his rifle, and set traps around the perimeter, transforming their peaceful haven into a fortress. The rescued settlers, now part of their burgeoning family, rallied around them, their gratitude manifesting as unwavering loyalty. Silas, the cynical trapper, surprised them all by offering his tracking skills, his weathered face grim with determination. The mountain man had saved his life once, and Silas, though gruff, honored his debts. They were ready as any small group could be against the relentless force that was about to descend. The first signs of their approach came with the snap of a twig, the faint glint of moonlight on metal through the dense forest. The bounty hunter, a grim figure named Hawk, emerged from the shadows, flanked by several hardened men, their faces masked by hoods, their eyes cold and unfeeling. They carried rifles and torches, their presence a stark, brutal contrast to the natural serenity of the mountains. Hawk's voice, when it came, was a low, chilling growl, carrying across the snow-laden clearing. "We know she's here. Deliver her, and no one else gets hurt. Resist and this place burns." He was not interested in negotiation, only in acquisition. He saw the mountain man as a simple obstacle, a recluse to be dealt with, unaware of the profound connection that now bound these two souls. But a detail caught the woman's eye, a flash of recognition that sent a shiver down her spine. One of Hawk's men, taller than the others, moved with a peculiar limp, a gait she knew well. It was her cousin, a man she had once trusted, who had promised to help her escape, only to betray her for a share of her father's bounty. His presence explained the uncanny precision of Hawk's tracking, the way they had cut through the treacherous mountain passes with such unsettling ease. This wasn't just a pursuit, it was a calculated hunt guided by inside knowledge, a betrayal that cut deeper than any other. The true enemy was not just the bounty hunter, but the insidious corruption that had festered within her own family. The mountain man raised his rifle, his finger resting on the trigger, his gaze locked on Hawk. But the woman stepped forward, her heart pounding a desperate rhythm. She knew that any open confrontation would end in bloodshed, innocent lives sacrificed. She saw the desperation in the eyes of Caleb's mother clutching her child. A swift, terrible decision formed in her mind, a sacrifice born of love and fierce protection. "I will go with them," she declared, her voice clear and strong, cutting through the tense silence. "But only if you swear on your life that no harm comes to anyone here, not a single hair on their heads. If you break that promise, I will find a way to make you pay." Her words hung in the icy air, a desperate gamble, a calculated surrender. She met Hawk's gaze, her defiance burning bright even as she offered herself, willingly walking back into the gilded cage of her past, hoping to buy the freedom of her newfound family with her own. The mountain man watched, his jaw clenched, torn between his primal urge to protect and his understanding of her desperate, self-sacrificing choice. The woman's declaration hung in the frigid air, a stark, desperate gambit. Hawk, the bounty hunter, paused, his cold eyes assessing her. Such courage, even in surrender, was unexpected. He agreed, a chilling smile playing on his lips, for he always preferred a clean capture. As the woman began to walk towards her captors, the mountain man's hand tightened on his rifle. Every fiber of his being screamed for him to intervene, to fight for her. But he knew the odds. He watched her go, a part of his soul tearing away with each deliberate step she took towards her gilded prison. The settlers, their faces a mixture of relief and sorrow, could only watch in stunned silence as the woman was led away, a lone figure disappearing into the snow-laden darkness. But the mountain man was a creature of the wild, and he did not abandon his own. His promise was not merely to protect the cabin, but to protect her. The moment the bounty hunters began their descent from the mountain, believing their mission accomplished, he moved. He knew these trails like the back of his hand, every hidden path, every treacherous drop, every whispering wind current. He moved with the silence of a ghost, trailing them from a distance, a shadow among shadows. He was not driven by blind rage, but by a calculated fury, a strategic determination born of his deep connection to the land and the woman he now considered his own. Hawk and his men, overconfident in their success, navigated the treacherous descent with a casual ease, their torches casting dancing shadows on the ancient trees. They were careful, but not cautious enough. The mountain man had spent years mastering the subtle language of the wilderness. He knew where the snow hid icy pitfalls, where loose rocks could become deadly projectiles, where a sudden gust of wind could become a disorienting gale. He did not engage them directly, for direct confrontation was a fool's game against superior numbers. Instead, he used the mountain itself as his weapon. A precise cut with his axe sent a small cascade of snow and ice tumbling onto their path, not enough to cause an avalanche, but enough to startle their horses and slow their progress. A series of expertly placed snares, designed for large game, caused one of Hawk's men to stumble, dropping his rifle. The woman, walking in the center of their formation, caught the mountain man's eye in a fleeting glance, a silent communication that spoke volumes. She understood. He was not giving up. And as they pressed deeper into a narrow canyon, place where the mountain walls loomed high and menacing, she knew he was drawing them into his arena. The confrontation reached its peak within that tight pass. Hawk, realizing they were being systematically tormented, ordered his men to spread out, to flush out their unseen assailant. But the mountain man was already ahead, positioned high on a rocky outcrop. He didn't fire his rifle. Instead, with a raw, primal roar that echoed through the canyon, he unleashed a carefully planned volley of boulders, dislodging them from a precarious perch. They thundered down, not directly at the men but between them, creating a barrier of shattered rock and splintered trees. Panic erupted. Horses reared, men scattered, their formation broken. In the ensuing chaos, the mountain man descended, moving with the speed and ferocity of a wildcat. He did not kill, but disarmed and incapacitated with swift, powerful blows, using his knowledge of grappling and the element of surprise. His movements were a blur, a whirlwind of force, disarming rifles, knocking men unconscious, never lingering long enough to be targeted. The men, trained for open combat, were utterly outmatched by his guerrilla tactics and intimate knowledge of the terrain. Hawk, a formidable fighter himself, faced the mountain man with a drawn knife, his eyes blazing. But the mountain man, using the environment to his advantage, disarmed him with a calculated kick, sending Hawk sprawling into a deep snowdrift, momentarily stunned. The woman, seizing the moment, broke free. She ran to her betrayed cousin, who lay groaning, trapped beneath a small fallen tree. She didn't seek revenge. Instead, she knelt, her eyes meeting his, and offered him a simple choice. Stay here and face the mountain, or tell me where my father's true wealth is hidden, the wealth he will steal from his own and blame on me. The cousin, terrified and shivering, his betrayal exposed, stammered a confession, revealing not just the location of hidden documents that proved her true inheritance, but also a network of corrupt officials her father had bought. It was not a grand treasure, but leverage, proof of his crimes, enough to undo his power and secure her freedom for good. The mountain man, seeing her standing firm, her eyes alight with a newfound power, did not need to ask. He knew. The battle was won not just through strength, but through her unwavering spirit and his unwavering devotion. The bounty hunters, beaten and broken, were left to find their own way out of the mountain's embrace, a harsh lesson in underestimating the wild and those who belonged to it. One of Hawk's men, however, a younger, less hardened one, managed to scramble free during the chaos, his eyes wide with fear, and disappeared back into the forest, a small, lingering thread of unease remaining in the vast quiet of the night. 9 months later, the mountain cabin bloomed with a warmth that transcended the changing seasons. Spring had surrendered to summer, painting the peaks in vibrant greens and wildflowers, a stark contrast to the white death that had once threatened to claim all. The cabin, once a solitary bastion, now hummed with the quiet rhythm of a family. The mountain man no longer moved with the restless solitude of a hermit. His hands, still strong and capable, now cradled a tiny bundle with a tenderness that defied his rugged exterior. His eyes, once guarded, now sparkled with a profound joy, reflecting the pure adoration he felt for the new life they had created. The woman, her face radiant with a newfound peace, sat by the hearth, a small, flaxen-haired child nestled at her breast. Her journey from desperate refugee to cherished wife, from outcast to mother, was etched in the serene curve of her smile. The harsh lines of worry that had once marked her features had softened, replaced by a deep contentment. She no longer sought escape. She had found belonging. Their home, fortified not just by logs but by shared experience and unwavering love, was a testament to resilience, a beacon of hope against the vast, indifferent wilderness. The settlers they had saved had moved on, some returning to their old lives, others forging new paths, but all carried the story of the mountain man and the woman, a legend whispered around campfires, a tale of love forged in the crucible of winter. One crisp autumn afternoon, as the leaves began their fiery descent, the mountain man returned from a hunt, a deer slung over his powerful shoulders. He entered the cabin to find the woman holding a faded, leather-bound journal she had discovered tucked away in an old chest, among his few cherished possessions. It was his father's, a chronicle of his family's early days in these very mountains, a history he had rarely spoken of. Within its brittle pages, she found not just his lineage, but a map of ancient trading routes, marked with symbols she recognized from the carved wooden bird. The journal spoke of a sacred spring, a place of healing known only to a select few, hidden deep within the very valley where her caravan had been trapped. It was a place her own grandfather, the carver, had visited for remedies, unknowingly creating the ancestral link between their families. The mountain man's family had not merely settled here by chance. They were the long-lost guardians of that sacred spring, their lineage intrinsically tied to the mountain's deepest secrets, a secret meant to be shared, not hoarded. The woman smiled, a knowing glint in her eyes. Their meeting was not merely fate, it was the weaving together of ancient threads, a destiny revealed through the trials of time. The laughter he had once shared with her as a child, the promise she had made so innocently, had echoed across 2 decades and countless miles, guiding them back to each other, to this specific place. He, the man who believed he was meant to be alone, found his true purpose in protection and belonging. She, the woman who believed she was meant to flee, found her true home in the heart of a mountain and the arms of a man who cherished her. The mountains, vast and ancient, hold countless stories, but few are as profound as the one whispered by the wind around this lonely cabin. It is a tale that teaches that courage is not always found in the grandest battles, but often in the quiet resilience of a woman's heart and the steadfast devotion of a man forged by the wild. It reminds us that family is not solely a matter of blood, but of the bonds we forge through shared hardship and unwavering love. And home, that most elusive of treasures, is not merely a place on a map or a structure of wood and stone. It is a feeling, a deep-seated sense of belonging, safety, and unwavering affection, found not in the clamor of civilization, but in the quiet, profound embrace of two souls who dared to remember a promise, and in doing so, built an enduring legacy against the backdrop of the untamed world. Did you enjoy this journey? Tell us from what corner of the world you're watching this story from. Leave your comment, and to make sure you don't miss the next adventure, subscribe to the channel.